I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com. And if you saw a recent IKEA video that I did on the as is section, then you saw that I was able to pick up this fun tray from IKEA. I'm excited to use it in my craft room, possibly use it to kind of carry supplies around the house when I'm doing other projects. So I'm going to, jazz this thing up just a little bit because that's what I do. And I thought I would do a video for you guys to show you how I plan to do it. So if you are interested in seeing how I decide to change up this tray, then stay tuned. I will link everything that I use down below. Otherwise, let's go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually take the tray apart because I am planning on decoupaging on top of the white section of the tray. So I think it'll be easier to take it apart to decoupage and then put it back together. I think I'm more likely to get clean lines that way. I did go back and forth on whether or not I wanted to paint the wood tone of the tray. I was thinking of painting it white or on the other end of the spectrum like a dark blue to match some of the dark blue accents in my craft room, but I ended up deciding that I didn't want to do that just because I thought I have warm wood tones in my room. I have wood tones mixed in, and so I thought it would kind of go with the feel of my craft room where it was kind of a mix of color and then wood tones. So I ended up deciding to keep the wood as is. Also, it was just in really good shape. There weren't any nicks or scratches or anything that I thought needed to be covered up. When you're buying as is items, especially from IKEA or just any thrift store, sometimes they are kind of beat up, and that's really when I decide to paint something or when I have to sand it down, things like that. This one was in good condition, and so I really wanted to save myself the time as well. There just wasn't a need to completely redo the whole thing. All right, I actually had a really hard time deciding what I wanted to do on this tray. And at first I was shying away from doing something that was really busy with lots of color, but truthfully in the end, I love color. Like I love the busyness of tons of color swatches. I just decided to go with what I wanted to do and not what I think the majority of people might have enjoyed. I know it probably would have looked nice with one big impact point, but I love color and my craft room is all about color, and so I decided to just embrace it. So these are napkins from Jane Davenport. They're collage napkins, and what I'm doing is tearing the back off of the napkins so that they are the thinnest ply possible. So you can see each time I'm kind of removing the backing, and then you have just this really thin napkin feel right here. And I'm going to use these 3 napkins in combination on my tray top here, starting with this girl. So the Jane Davenport girls are kind of a theme that I have in my craft room. I have a large one on one of my pegboards, a smaller one on my second pegboard, so I thought it would be appropriate to have one of her gorgeous artistic creations on this tray as well. So I'm just using some scissors, trimming it out, obviously not super nicely, but that's okay. It'll still look good once it's decoupaged down, or once I use the Mod Podge to put it down. And then I decided I will just take these other napkins, and what I'm going to do is cut them apart and place them in different ways that really just create a whole look of swatching across the whole back of this particular tray. And I'm going to leave a space open in the middle. You can see I'm going to kind of experiment on where I want everything, but I'll end up deciding to leave a space in the middle where I can add some words, because of course something that always inspires me would be seeing inspirational words. And so I have words all over my craft room. I have words all over my house just because they really speak to me in a lot of ways. So I'm going to leave this white space here in the middle where I'll be able to add a word later on, and I can tuck in all of these swatches around the edges. I am ready for the Mod Podge, and even though my work surface is already pretty well beat up, I am going to put a towel down just so I don't get Mod Podge everywhere. Bringing back my piece and just moving things off, I opted to do hard coat Mod Podge, which was a new Mod Podge to me. I'm sure it's been out for a while. I don't end up using Mod Podge all the time, but this is supposed to dry with a hard finish for furniture, which I thought was very appropriate because of course This will eventually have plenty stacked on top of it, and I want it to be nice and strong. So I decided to go ahead and use this. I think regular Mod Podge, depending on what you're using your tray for, could work just fine as well. But you can see I'm just putting a coat down and then putting the napkins on top and then putting Mod Podge on top of that. So just sandwiching those napkins with the Mod Podge and flattening them out as much as I can. They're not going to be completely flat. There will be wrinkles. That doesn't bother me. I don't mind the texture at all, especially when you're doing Mod Podge. That's just something that's going to happen. So filling in all of the little spaces here. This goes pretty quickly, and you can see it's going to make a pretty big difference right away. So getting everything situated, and then I will bring in these little pieces here and there, and now I have that space for my girl and her gorgeous hair that'll kind of flow up from the bottom edge. And then I have one more set of squares that I will use to kind of overlap that girl, because I think it makes for an interesting texture when they're all overlapped. So that is all of that. I do end up doing a second coat, but then I just let the whole thing kind of dry. These pieces are from the girls' napkin, so it's leftover pieces. I thought maybe if I layered these on top, of course there is a lot of linear with all the blocking and the swatching, and so I'm going to layer these on top just to change it up a little bit, add a little bit more dimension. You can see I'm just putting it around the edges in some different areas, and I think it came out pretty cute. So another layer, here's that second layer I was talking about on top of this, making sure everything is nice and coated, especially the edges. I don't want any edges coming up. So being pretty generous with the Mod Podge here and making sure it all gets down and as flat as possible. And once I'm pretty comfortable with that, I put it aside to dry. Okay, I am now in Cricut Design Space on my computer, and I'm going to design the word or the phrase that I want to go on my tray. And I'm going with the phrase "live colorfully," which is perfect for all of the color that's on that tray. I'm just switching up the font to a font called Spring Break that I really like the look of. And then I'm just going to resize for how big that space is. The space where the opening is really about 12 inches long and 3.5 inches tall. You can see I'm going to cut this out of a dark blue permanent vinyl. So I'm resizing it to what that would look like, and then I didn't really like the proportion, so I don't go all the way to 3.5 inches. I try going all the way to 12 inches long, which I liked, but when I went to hit make it, it turned out that would need an extra large mat. And I do have an extra large mat, and I had enough vinyl and all that, but in the end I didn't really want to go with that. I decided here's what it'll look like, see how it put it on the 12 by 24 mat, and that's just not something I was interested in doing. So I'm deciding I'm gonna just cancel this cut and go resize just so I can make sure it all fits on a 12 by 12 mat. So taking it here, just going to resize it down to about 11 inches, and that should make it fit on a standard size mat, which it does. And so we are ready to cut. At this point, all you have to do is go to continue, and then it will find your maker via Bluetooth, and then you set your base material, and I will do a search for vinyl just to make sure I have the correct vinyl picked. So it ends up being premium vinyl with a gloss permanent vinyl. So I find that, search for vinyl, just see what my options are just to make sure I have the correct one chosen. And then I always choose heavy pressure or extra pressure just to make sure it's a good cut. Once everything is set over on the computer, you just take it over to your Cricut. This is the Cricut Maker 3. This is sped up, but the Cricut Maker 3 cuts so fast, you guys, like super, super, super fast. So it's cutting through the vinyl, and then I will be able to do a little bit of weeding and get this phrase onto my tray to finish up this really simple, really easy DIY project. Weeding is when you remove the extra material that you're not intending to use, which is all of that negative space right there. And I like to do that while it's still on the mat just because it holds everything nice and still. So removing all those extra pieces, and now I will bring over some transfer tape, making sure it's nice and secure onto the transfer tape, pulling it up off of the mat and off of the backing, and I have my phrase and it is ready to go onto my tray. You just press it down and then pull up the transfer tape and you are done. If you are putting this over the top of Mod Podge, you will want to make sure it is very, very dry before you start to lift it up. Now that the phrase is in place, what I want to do is cover it again with that same hard furniture Mod Podge, just so it'll have a hard finish and it will match the rest of it. And I will end up deciding to go over a couple of times. The hardest part about this was being patient for the Mod Podge to dry. That was just something patience is not my strong point, so I really had to put it aside and just work on something else and let this dry all the way. It needs a good few hours to be completely dry. But once it was dry, then I was able to just reassemble my tray. It did work out really nicely to take this piece out of the wooden handles for the tray. I just think it ends up with a cleaner look. I didn't end up with extra Mod Podge or things kind of hanging over on the tray. If you are wanting to redo the wood, then that is going to be much easier, much more easily done if it's taken apart and not doing it while it's all attached together. So very carefully getting it all back in there, putting all the screws back in, and this was a fun project to work on. It's always fun to go thrifting or check out the IKEA as is section and find things that you can redo and repurpose with your own tastes in mind. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. I will link the supplies that I use down below so that you can check those out. I want to give a huge shout out to my Scrappy YouTube members. Thank you so much for all of your support. If you're interested in becoming a Scrappy YouTube member and joining us, then make sure to click the join button or there is a link in the description box. All right, I hope that you have an absolutely fabulous day and as always, keep it creative.